All right, everyone, welcome back to the Fun Corporation. And in this episode, we're just going to go ahead and jump straight into it. We're breaking down the 1978 season in this one, this being episode 11, I believe, of the Fun Corp series. And now, starting with the additions, you can see I'm already getting into the building for this one. I kind of had an idea. The original conception of this was to build a couple of performing art centers, one at each park. Back in the 70s, 80s, even 90s, live entertainment was a big part of regional amusement parks, and it's kind of fallen by the wayside in modern times. Some parks still have seasonal events that'll still have some live performances, but by and large, live performances have kind of fallen off the edge, and I wanted to put something that fit the lines of that inside our parks here at Fun Corp. However, as I was building these, I came up with the idea of what if, for these parks, instead of performing art centers, we put movie theaters in. And this was just something I kind of came up with, because the original conception was always going to be the 3D cinemas for this one, and I wanted one stage, one for each of the films that they show in the game. So we ended up putting the 3D cinemas in, but my idea for having an actual movie theater in each of the parks really grew on me. Now, this is something that, while in-game, as you'll take a peek at, it's going to be free to enter. However, this is something I would definitely upcharge in if the timeline of the game's years lined up with the timeline of the series years for this. And they just don't. We found that out with the mini golf we put in a couple seasons ago. However, I really liked the idea of just having a movie theater, because if a family comes in and they want to have some entertainment, I mean, you can come in, you can ride rides, you can get food, but what if you need a break? And this is something I kind of talked about with the observation tower. The observation tower is something the family can all enjoy together, but what if we changed this and put it into an entertainment venue with 3 movie theaters? So inside the theaters, you have each of the 3 cinemas, again corresponding to each of the in-game films we have. And then we have a nice little concession stand to go with each one. So we have the popcorn, we have the soda, and then you can go ahead and head on in and grab a movie. And when you're done, you can come back out and enjoy a couple rides and maybe take off for the day. And the reason I kind of considered this was something I've learned throughout my career is that amusement parks really don't just battle with each other for visitorship. I mean, think of your local park and think of what entertainment venues surround it. I mean, it could be a movie theater, it could be a park, it could be a sporting event, but those are all entertainment venues that amusement parks have to compete with. So I kind of took the idea and just merged it into one. You kind of see Hershey Park do this as well with the Hershey Stadium right adjacent to the park itself. And there's been a couple times where they have really good bands. There's one time Green Day performed at Hershey Stadium and I really wanted to go see it, but alas, I do not live close enough to Hershey Park to make that work out. However, I have been to Hershey Park anyway, but just not at the same time. But just the idea of combining these 2 entertainment venues was a really cool idea to me. So if you take a look, both of the theaters will feature the same design, 3 theaters, small queue lines on the inside so guests don't get bored too fast, and then one long exit path connecting all 3 theaters on the back end, so guests leaving the theaters don't connect with the guests queuing in line for the theaters as well. So you saw Funlands, and here's Joylands. Joylands definitely took a lot more modifying to put together because there was a lot of land to mess with, and when we start breaking down the finances, you'll see that a hefty chunk, and our revenue's down quite a bit, but this right here took a hefty chunk of our revenue out because this was a really expensive endeavor at Joyland, and hopefully it works out, but we'll break down the finances closer to the end of the video. But each one's going to feature a very similar front. You know, at Funland you saw we had a nice little plaza with a pond in the middle. Now Joyland's not going to end up getting the pond, but it will get a nice little plaza area outside. And along with Joyland, as we put together the building, you can kind of see the start of the plaza over there with the ramp next to mini golf and Apollo. It kind of follows down. And as we get the building set up here, we'll follow the path and get it all set up. But we're going to eventually build a nice looking plaza out in front. But as far as the building goes, you have the 3 theaters on the inside. We talked about the small queue lines. And the building at each of the 2 parks is going to be pretty similar, if not the exact same. I didn't draw a blueprint or anything like that. I just used my memory and tried to get them as close as I could, and I think I got it pretty darn close, at least as close as I could. And the big signs that say either Funland or Joyland Cinema or Theater, I think, is what I ended up putting on there. But I'm really happy with the way these buildings turned out, by and large. I mean, from the back, they look kind of plain, but from the front, they look pretty good. Any park you go to, any regional park anyway you go to, the buildings tend to look kind of dry from the back. They just look like any other building anywhere, really. But the front is where you decorate this. And that's something I especially learned from my home park, Adventureland, as we feature a Disney-like Main Street as you kind of walk down. But if you walk around and take a look from like our Skywheel, the back of the buildings all look very, very plain. But it's all about forced perspective in the technical terms on that side. But as you can see right here, we're getting the building all finished, and we'll eventually work our way down into getting the little plaza done. And then what I eventually ended up doing here as well is I added a food plaza out in front of the theaters, because at Joyland, outside of the arcade nearby here, there's really no food plaza nearby this section of the park we're expanding into. So I thought this was a really good opportunity to add one in. And then it also, you'll notice, we'll leave kind of a blank spot for a future attraction, potentially next season in 1979. But we're planning ahead because we really want to start expanding over into this area. And there we go, getting the little plaza set up and a couple of food stands placed in to kind of tie the whole area together. But as far as additions go for this season, we're just going to stick with the movie theaters and kind of see how that goes. Again, this is just an idea I had and I thought would be very, very cool. So I decided to kind of throw it on in. But we'll continue building in the background here. But let's go ahead and hop on over into our finances for the 1978 season. And starting off with Funland, if we take a look at our coaster ridership, Corkscrew has overtaken Cyclone as the most ridden coaster in 1978. That's kind of fascinating to me because Corkscrew only runs the 2 trains, whereas Cyclone ran all 3 all year, I believe. But Corkscrew taking a pretty firm hold. I almost said Cyclone there, but we're talking about Corkscrew right now. Corkscrew taking really good, and then it's over 500,000 riders, and it's getting very close to 1 million riders very fast for a ride that runs 2 trains. But these early Aero coasters really, really were kings of throughput for their parks. Everything else regarding Funland looks fairly standard. And if we look on over into Joyland, White Cyclone being the only coaster to bring in over 100,000 riders this season, and that ride is also nearing 1 million riders as we get close. And I think that will far and away be the first coaster at Joyland to go ahead and take and make the 1 million riders club. Looking down into the flats, we have Joyland Mainline Railroad, which is just about 35,000 riders short of being at 1 million itself. And again, everything else looking pretty standard as far as it goes. Although something interesting, if you look at the movie theaters, each one has a different ridership corresponding with the length of each of the films, which I thought was just kind of entertaining. I knew they were all different lengths, but it actually, over time, a decent amount of different sets of riders can ride each one. So, I mean, that's something to kind of keep in mind if you play scenarios quite a bit. You might get a higher excitement rating from the longer films. However, I believe Mouse Tales is the shortest one. I think that's the one we have set to Joyland Theater 1, and that one brought in more riders total. So that's something to keep in mind depending on how much you charge. More throughput, honestly, could be better than more excitement because that means more people are going to pay for it over time. And you're going to get more people through over time, which means cha-ching more money. And hopping on over into our revenue tab. Again, we took a big hit for the construction of the movie theaters in May because I waited quite a while before I started putting them together. But as you can see, Joyland barely brought in a profit. Only $44,000 brought in May, and that park usually brings in quite a bit for its opening month. But a lot of that went into the construction of the movie theaters. Same thing over at Funland. You see in May we're actually in the negative, and that's because we spent quite a bit of money building up the movie theaters. Now, we didn't have to move quite as much land around at Funland, but it still ate in to our profit quite substantially if you look over at it. And then as far as the total season goes, we kind of had a down year. We didn't break 1 million until August, where we had over 1 million in profit. However, September still profitable, and in October we hit almost 1 million as well. But overall, our profit was down quite a bit because we brought in over 3 million at both Funland and Joyland last year. And this year, looking over at Joyland's profit, $1,692,144.20. And at Funland, we brought in $2,049,328.40 for a grand total of $3,741,526.60 for our 1978 profit. And we would end up banking $2 million of that, so subtract $1 million off the number I just gave you. And our bank currently is sitting at $22,296,152.90. So a down year for us, but I'm confident we can turn it around next year and get us back where we need to be. And that's all I have as far as our corporation goes. Let's go ahead and hop on over into the coasters of 1978, and there are quite a few significant ones. In fact, I'm going to mention 8. I'm going to start with 4 honorable mentions, and then I'm going to delve into 4 other coasters a little more in detail as we've done in the past. So as for our honorable mentions of 1978, we have Blazing Fury at Dollywood, their dark ride coaster. We have Shockwave and Mindbender at Six Flags Over Texas and Six Flags Over Georgia, respectively. Both similar rides. I've had the pleasure of riding Mindbender at Six Flags Over Georgia. I didn't get the opportunity to ride it with the 7-car train. I only rode it after they did their quote-unquote upgrade to it with the 5-car Premier trains, I believe is who put those on there. Pretty sure they're Premier. They might be Gerstlauer, though. Can't think of it off the top of my head. But not the biggest fan of Mindbender. It was okay for what it was, but when it's sitting next to, I think, the second best Batman clone, it kind of gets overshadowed in my mind. But it's still a decent ride. And those 2 rides at those 2 Six Flags parks, very similar, both double looping coasters, although Over Texas has its double loops back to back, whereas Over Georgia has them separated by some track. And the last honorable mention we're going to bring up is Lightning Loops at Great Adventure, 2 Aero Shuttle Loops that combine interlocked loops. And I can't even imagine climbing the stairs to the upper shuttle loop on this this complex, because that had to be quite the flight of stairs, knowing how many stairs I had to climb to get up to ride Sidewinder. Anyway, with our first major coaster we're going to talk about Loch Ness Monster at Busch Gardens The Old Country, now known as Busch Gardens Williamsburg. Now this is a coaster that stood at 130 feet tall, featured a top speed of 60 miles per hour, has a track length of 3,240 feet, features 2 lift hills and 2 interlocking vertical loops. Another ride I've had the pleasure of riding, I've actually gotten to ride it on 2 separate trips. The first time, I believe, was 2016, and the second time was this past year in 2024. So I've had the pleasure to ride this ride before and after the premiere renovation that took place for 2024. I gotta say, the additions they added to this season were really cool, with the little speeches that happen as you go up the hills and then around through the tunnel and up the second hill as well. And then the Loch Ness Monster head at the bottom, but Loch Ness Monster was kind of the ride that really set Busch Gardens on its path to be more of a destination and thrill ride kind of park. Because you had Busch Gardens Tampa put up Python, which was just a plain Aero Corkscrew model, but with King's Dominion being a rival to this park, Anheuser-Busch decided to build a monster, quote-unquote, of a coaster. It's in the name, Loch Ness Monster anyway. And that was actually really good for its time, and still holds up even today, I think, as one of the best rides at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. Next coaster we're going to talk about is Colossus at Six Flags Magic Mountain. I don't know if it was Six Flags yet, but we'll just go with Magic Mountain for now, just to kind of break the tension here. So this ride was featured in the movie Vacation, and it stood at a height of 125 feet, featured a top speed of 62 miles an hour, and is the longest of the 4 coasters we're going to talk about, with a total track length of 4,325 feet. Now, if you have not seen the movie Vacation yet, go out and watch it. Not the new one or the sequels. The original Vacation, really good movie. Didn't get the chance to ride this one in its original form, although now it stands as an RMC conversion. Looked really impressive, though, from the images you can see of it, and even as Goliath started to tower over it, Colossus was just a beautiful ride. Twin-tracked, massive wooden roller coaster that really put Magic Mountain on the map at its time. Now, the next coaster of 78 we're going to talk about is Gemini at Cedar Point. So this one I have ridden multiple times on each side, and this past haunt season I got the chance to ride it trimless, which was quite the experience. Those helixes a lot more intense when those trim brakes are not active, let me tell you. But Gemini, the reason I want to include this one, Cedar Point claimed it to have a couple world records that it actually really didn't when it opened. They claimed it was the tallest, even though Loch Ness Monster stood 5 feet taller, and they claimed it was the fastest, even though Screeching Eagle at Six Flags St. Louis was faster. The real thing I want to focus on with Gemini is the monster for throughput this ride was. Cedar Point was drawing in crowds, and they wanted this ride to get anyone on it as fast as they could. So you have 2 separate tracks. Each was capable of running 3 trains. And if you go back to how Arrow set up their rides, if you watch a Gemini POV, the train will drop off the lift, go around the course, and right before it heads for its final return run through the structure, through the helixes back to the station, it passes over a set of brakes. Now, back when this ride opened, these would lock if the block ahead was not clear at the brake run before the station. And when those brakes locked and that train stopped there, it forced a breakdown. So they had a specific target they had to ship the train out at before the ride essentially broke itself down and maintenance had to come over and manually reset the ride. So not only that, you have 3 trains per side, so 6 total trains capable of holding up to 30 passengers, constantly having to be forced out to keep that line moving, otherwise you broke the ride down. Just an absolute monster of throughput Gemini was, and even now they don't run 3 trains anymore, they just run 2 per side, so a total of 4. It's still, that line keeps moving pretty fast. It's pretty rare to see Gemini up to an hour-long wait. I don't even think that's due to its popularity. I really just think it's that ride can really pump the throughput through and get guests on the ride and off the ride as fast as it can. The last one I want to talk about in this video, and it's not really major of note, although it was just named an Ace Landmark this past season and I was able to attend the ceremony for it. This is going to be Tornado at Adventureland in Iowa, standing at a height of 93 feet, top speed of 58 miles an hour, and a total track length of 2,840 feet. Now, this ride was my first coaster, and it's always going to hold a special place in my heart, and it's not very often I can say I owe my career to what this ride is. I definitely would not be where I am right now, not only in my work life, my personal life, my hobbies. I would not be there without this coaster. This ride will hold a special place in my heart for a very, very long time. I just wanted to make sure that it was brought up. And as you're watching this, if you're thinking about your first coaster, make sure to give it props. Even though it may not be your favorite anymore, you do owe it something for getting you into this hobby. And that's all I have for this video covering the 1978 season. We talked about Funland season and the abundance of notable coasters that opened in 1978. Another thing I want to talk about real quick, shout out to you guys. I just hit 600 subscribers. Really didn't get the chance to celebrate 500 as it was during the operating season and didn't have a whole lot of time to stop by and check on the channel, but thank you all so much for tuning in and watching. Kind of have an idea for a video I want to do. A little bit of a special that might be important to this series. Eventually, I just kind of want to show you my style for coaster building, so kind of keep an eye out for that. But again, thank you so much for tuning in to the 1978 season and episode 11 here at Fun Corporation, and I will see you in the next one. See you later.